Today we're gonna do a different video. We're gonna be in the shop. We actually have an actual problem with the car. We're gonna take a look at it. We're gonna do some diagnosis, and we'll show you some steps, and we'll have shop talk, if you would, right after this. So we have here a 2011 Toyota Camry 4-cylinder 2ARFE, right around 166,000 miles, Chicago car, so it's a little rusty. Snow. We're in the middle of, well, not in the middle, beginning of January. It is about 11 degrees and very windy in Chicago. God bless our heater there because it's very cold outside. This car burns oil, and when I say burns oil, burns a lot of oil. We're talking constantly having to top it off. It's like a two-stroke motor. You got to add gas and oil at the same time. So what we're going to do is, I want to determine, is this thing too far gone, or should we talk to the owner about disembarking from this car, or we still have some hope where you can keep adding? Because the problem with oil consumption is, we talked about it in a video where it gets to a point where it's really bad, where now you're drinking oil, but then you start lacking power. The catalytic converter goes, and it just becomes kind of a snowball effect. I just want to see how bad this engine is. We're going to do a compression test. We're going to pull the spark plugs, look inside the cylinder, see what we see, and go from there, just to kind of give them a general health of the engine. That way he can decide if he still wants to keep driving this thing or sell it while it's still driving and not starting that snowball effect. Having said that, let's first take a quick look at the car. Let's see just kind of a quick inspection. Well, it's very dirty, and we have some snow over there, melting, of course. This is the thing when working on cars in the snow area, like me in Chicago. You're working on a car that's up, and the snow is melting, it's dripping over you, and of course the salt drops are especially fall in your eye. You just get used to it after some time. But let's look at this thing. Right off the bat, power steering leak. This is a common one. At least the power steering fluid is good. I mean, not good as in clean, but good as in there is some in the reservoir. But this line is super common to leak. This return line, actually, this gets loose like that because the hose gets brittle. And coolant, no coolant. That's good. Actually, it's not good. Let's look at the radiator here. This engine is not very hot. Okay, there is some coolant there, so that's. We'll take a quick look at. See if we see any big leaks. Common on these is the top seam of the radiator leaks, or the bottom one. We'll take a look at that, but that's least of our worries. Belts. Yeah, the belts have cracks. That's especially that alternator one. Really hard to see it on camera, but it does have some cracks. Back one is usually, yeah, it also has cracks. And the notorious ground, this always breaks. I remember the last camera I looked at that's rusty land, that this ground is not broken. Doesn't seem to affect a lot, but I usually recommend fixing it because you don't want to wait for the gremlins to start before fixing it. But very dirty engine bay. This is a working car, not exactly a car care nut owner, but a try. And that broke, of course. Let's pop this grommet for the cover. Well, that's not going to go on. Well, welcome to working on cars. Things break all the time. That's okay. Could be worse. Let's put this aside. Well, we're not going to go too heavy on the inspection because we gotta. This is what I call the condemning moment. Are we going to condemn this car where it's pointless to just do the inspection, or are we going to say, okay, well, there's some life left, let's make sure everything else, because I don't like to work on condemned cars, because anything you do to a car that is done, it's not worth it. You rebuild this engine, you total this car, you do anything else, you're just wasting money because this car is done. So that I don't like to do that, and I don't recommend anybody do that. And actually, as we speak, I have a 2001 Camry. I posted it on Instagram. 2001 Camry, 144,000 miles, rusty, not really the cleanest example. The owner, after we begged him and begged him not to do this, he's putting a Reman aftermarket long block, 7,000 plus job. Ridiculous. It's not worth it. That car is not worth $3,000 in a good day. Let's start with this thing. Let's pull the spark plugs. Let's take a peek inside the cylinders and we'll go from there. Let me get some gloves here. Wedding ring off. Sorry, Mrs. Car Care Nut. Actually, we're going to want to pull the coils all the way out this time. Oop, that broke. What are you going to do? Welcome to the working on older cars. I was waiting for that to happen. Of course. Welcome to the old design of ignition coil connectors. When you work on older cars, I mean, this is not super old, but, you know, cars with miles, you take one disaster at a time. As you work, things break and things fall apart, and it's like, all right, let's get to the end of the line here, and then we'll start dealing with some of these disasters. Because let's pull all spark plugs. Well, that spark plug doesn't look too bad. I don't see any fouling. Looks okay. It's not an original spark plug. Usually the original spark plugs will have a mark right here. Let's pull the rest of them. Number 2 looks okay. 2. Same spark plug, none, not the factory one. It's an original plug, but it's not the factory one. That's what I meant. This one looks okay too. Same thing. Yeah, this one, I hope you can see it well. This one has a little bit of carbon. So that was number 4. Let me see where the pistons are at. So you wanna when you boroscope, when you look inside the cylinder with a camera, you wanna make sure that the cylinder is down. So number 4 is down. These 2 should be up. Actually, this is a perfect spot. What are the chances? So there's a point where the 4 cylinders, 2 are up, 2 are down, but there's a point where they're all at the same height, and this is what we have right here. You'll see it. So here's a boroscope that I actually just got off of Amazon. If this turns out to be good, I'll leave the link below. If not, we're not going to recommend it, because these boroscopes, this is not exactly cheap. I wanted something really good, but some of them are really bad. Let's hook this thing up and this boroscope has 2 cameras, one on the side and one in the front. I like the side one because we could see. Let's start. I want to start with that cylinder number 4. And I'll record the video here so I can post it so you guys can see what I'm seeing. Here we are in the moment of truth. Once it goes in. There we go. Okay, well, that's typical carbon for this age of car. Nothing I'm too worried about. But what I really want to look at here we go. That's what I want to look at. So do you see this is one valve? It has a little bit of carbon, looks like. Yeah, it's actually a little, quite a bit, but that's typical this age. You can still somewhat see the face of the valve, but then there we go. Here's a disaster. That's the first disaster. Do you see it right there? In the editing, I'll put a arrow on that so you can see it. Do you see that burn mark right there on the wall? Do you see how it's a beautiful crosshatch pattern? And then right there, you see that mark? That's what's causing our oil consumption. So at this point, here's these, you see these scratches. These scratches, you gotta feel them. If you feel them with your fingernail, it's no good. But some of these are carbon scratches. They're actually on top. So I'm not worried about scratches, but I'm worried about that right there. That's no good. That's really no good. And let's see the rest of, kind of turn it around and look. Yeah, it's usually every single time with the 2 ARFE and the 1 ARFE is the same thing. That spot right there. This is what happens when you change your oil at 10,000 miles and hopefully every year and hopefully at 10,000 miles. Folks, I've seen this image that you just seen countless times. When the engine's out of the car, we tear it apart. Usually, in a good world, when you pull an engine apart, if the cylinder walls are fine, we're good, we can re-ring it. That means we're gonna put new pistons, new rings, clean everything up, inspect everything else, oil clearance, all the bearings and everything else. But in this case, this block is done. You cannot machine the surface. This is how these blocks are. They're one-time use. And this block, if it doesn't have that mark, you could drive at 400,000 miles and it'll still be perfectly fine because you saw the rest of it was perfectly fine. That one spot, that's all it takes for this thing to start drinking 2-3 quarts every 1,000 miles. Let's look at the rest of the cylinders. I'll hit record again so you guys can see what I'm seeing. Let me flip the camera so we can look at the piston first. Okay, so the valves are open here. That's cool. Here is the piston. Has a little bit of carbon. This is typical. How are the valves? So let me flip the camera. There we go. Let's look at these valves. I want to show you something. This valve is open. So on direct injection cars, right there, right at the stem of the valve, you'll have a giant glob of carbon. That's how they carbon up. This one, very, very slight, because this is port injection, so we're not worried. But let's look at the cylinder walls. Here, here's the top of the piston. Spin right there. Might have a spot. Where is it? Flip around. Right there. Same spot. I have seen this so many times in my career. It is incredible. Same spot. Not as bad as the other one. I can still see some crosshatch, but ooh, this scratch doesn't look good. That scratch looks definitely more highlighted. You still have to feel this one, but that spot, the same thing. Let's look at cylinder number 2. Let me flip the camera. This one is smoking still. This engine is still a little hot. This one is not so bad. It's actually a little cleaner than the rest, especially in the middle. Let's flip the camera. Let's look at the valves. Here are the valves. Yeah, this one has a little bit of carbon. Nothing alarming. This one is a little dirtier. Now let's look at the cylinder wall. Spin it. See, that scratch is also a little, no, this one might be okay. See, same, there is it. Thought I saw a spot. right there. This one is barely just starting right there. Not something I will be too concerned about. But do you see that crosshatch? That crosshatch is very important. That crosshatch is what the rings will seal on. If that crosshatch is gone, we have no seal, and then the thing will just start blowing oil past. Let's look at cylinder number 1 real quick. Valves have a little bit of carbon. This one is not so much. Here's the top of the piston. Oh boy, here we go. This one is really bad. So because these pistons are halfway, if we turn the engine and lower this piston all the way down, you'll see this very clear, but I can already see it. Crosshatch is gone. And I'll put a pointer so you can see it in the video, but this is not good. This thing is done. So here's the situation. Here's what we have right now. This block is done. It's over. You cannot machine these blocks to, rehome them so you can recreate that crosshatch. This is how it is by Toyota because the walls are very thin. They don't have much. This is a very tight tolerance of engines. This block is done. There is no saving this. You can't put oil cleaner. It's done. It basically needs a new block, new engine. At that point, it's not something I recommend. But we haven't condemned this car yet. We know it burns oil, but how bad is the compression? How bad is that little area that has no crosshatch really affecting this engine running wise? It burns oil, we know that, but let's do a quick compression test and see where this engine stands. Compression test. This is my good old trusty Snap-on compression tester. I wouldn't recommend any other one because some of these compression testers, if this splits from this and this starts spinning, you're going to have a very hard time getting this off, because imagine you screw this where the spark plug is and now you can't unscrew it to get it out and get stuck. Compression test, you always want to have a Schrader valve there so it would hold the pressure. Let's start with cylinder number 4. This engine is warmed up enough so we can do a quick compression test. Before we do that though, we already have the ignition disabled. We want to disable fuel so the injectors wouldn't be spraying fuel down. So I'm going to unplug the 4 injectors. That's the easiest way. It'll set a bunch of trouble codes. And as a mechanic, you always have to think of your customer. Do they have emission tests? Because once you erase the codes, it's going to need some time to run the OBD2 monitors. I checked. It says July of 22, so we don't have emission tests coming up soon. In Illinois, it's every 2 years, so he has a lot of time. It's not like running out next week the plates in case he has an emission test. But we got 4 injectors disconnected. Just double check. Yeah, 4 injectors. We have fuel disabled. We have ignition disabled. We're going to connect this. Mrs. Car Canada is going to actually show you the gauge. I'm going to go crank the car and we'll see where we're at. What do we have? So we have just around 210 exactly on the dot. So the spec on this is 210 actually, and I wrote it down here so I remember. I don't like to guess on this. So we have 210 psi, the minimum is 142, the maximum variance between the cylinders is 29 psi, I'm sorry. So this cylinder is good, and this was actually the worst one. Let's real quick do the other 3. This one, we have like almost 215, so that's okay. Sorry, I scared Mrs. Karkier that I was supposed to release the pressure here, I forgot. Ooh, this one is no good. See, that's what we have right here. We got about 170, 175-ish. That's a little low. That's a concern. This one is 205, so I'm happy with that one. I want to revisit cylinder number 2 just to see if I didn't crank it long enough. That's confirmed. This is no good. So we do have a low compression on one cylinder. It's actually, I'm looking at it right now, 170 psi. I want you to see it on camera. This is a problem. So our variance between the cylinders is out of spec. That's an issue. And this is a start. It's not a giant variance. This engine will still run okay. I know the spec is 30. We're technically right around there. I'm gonna give this gauge, these gauges are accurate, but I would give them a 5 to 10 psi variance. Plus, you know, our battery is not consistent. I will give it barely passing, barely, because we're not below the minimum of 142, but we're not at 210 or 200. It's a little low. That's a small concern. But this is where we're going to want to make a decision here. This car burns oil. We already have one cylinder starting to bite the dust, if you would. So at this point, my recommendation is this car pretty soon is going to need attention for this situation. You're going to start, your catalytic converter is going to possibly start failing, or it might already be. But the biggest concern is when you get to a point where this burns oil so much and the compression drops low enough where now you have misfires and now the car doesn't run right, doesn't pass emissions. And now what is the end goal here? I typically recommend to my customers, don't get to that point, then want to make a decision. You want to do this first. This is a situation. And before we wrap up this video, because now I have to actually call the customer and talk to him, I want to show you one thing. If Mrs. Karkiernut would follow me here, I want to show you a couple things here. Take the camera. First thing is the miles. So you can see it. It's 166,870. And then the oil change sticker. I don't have a problem with Walmart. Oil is oil. If they say they used Mobil 1 synthetic, that's not an issue, maybe an aftermarket. But the miles to replacement is 167, so we're doing good. But here's the problem. August 23, 2021. Folks, we are in January of 2022. That is quite a bit of time here that this oil change was overdue, and this is how this happens. Folks, you saw this. Please take care of your cars. Mileage or time. You go 5,000 miles, you go 6 months, you're playing it safe. If you go 5,500 miles, it's okay. If you go 7-8 months, it's okay. But now we're 6 months over, possibly a year, because I don't know when this was replaced. Did they put a year? Did they put 10,000 miles? I don't really know that. This is what I'm going to have to talk to the customer about. And the second thing, he wants the brakes done, because the brakes are almost metal to metal here, almost 0 millimeters. We might end up doing the brakes just so he would have some time until he decides what he wants to do here. But this car is heading towards the end for this engine. Definitely not worth putting a used engine or something, because this is the problem with Chicago cars. They get very rusty, and it comes to a point you're better off selling it, taking that money, buying another car, maybe not a new car, but something better. And we haven't even inspected the rest of the car. The coolant's low. We might have leaks, needs belts, needs power steering. We're not gonna start piling things on top of each other until I talk to the customer here. One thing on the camera, I love this camera. It was a super high quality camera, and I'm actually gonna take this one to work because the one I have is terrible. It's a cheapo one that plugs to your phone, really doesn't work well. I used to have a Snap-on one, it broke. Not the greatest either, but this is a really highly recommended camera. I really loved it. I will leave the link for that one in the description if you want to buy a camera like that. A little bit expensive. If you don't do this kind of work, it might not work very well for you, but if you do, or you want it for something else, if you do construction or something, it's a really good camera. Folks, I hope this video was helpful and informative. I hope you learned something new. If you like it, consider giving it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber watching for the first time, well, thank you for watching first, and consider subscribing to the channel. And until the next video, folks, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and you have yourself a wonderful day.